I'd like to go ahead and call to order the Nevada Commission for the Reconstruction of the V&T Railway. It's Thursday, October 28th, 1 p.m. We are here in the Carson City Community Center, Robert Bob Kroll Boardroom. Allison, could you go ahead and do a roll call, please?
Sure can.
Thank
Clay
you.
Mitchell,
I'm here.
Denny Dotson, David Peterson,
Present.
Stephanie Hicks. Here. Jim Wells.
Awesome. We have a quorum, everybody. All right, let's move on to agenda item number 3, the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody could please stand. Thank you.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, we'll move on to agenda item 4, public comment. The public is invited to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of this public body. I don't see any public comment in the room. Is there any public comment on the phone line?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move on to agenda item 5 for possible action, approval of the minutes of the September 23rd, 2021 meeting. Has everybody had a chance to look through the minutes and any changes, any edits?
I do have one change.
Yeah, go ahead.
Allison Bolton for the record. On page 4, paragraph 4,
Okay.
in one of the stats, there's an extra 3 listed.
Okay,
So it should read 2083, not 33.
okay.
Correct. So there's 2 extra 3s.
That was, okay. Any, go ahead, Jim.
And same page in the first paragraph, it's the Division of Environmental Protection. We do not increase them to a department level.
Okay, division. Thank you, Jim. Any other edits or changes anybody would like to see? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the minutes with the 2 corrections.
Thank you. We have a motion from Jim. Do I have a second?
Motion.
Thank you, Clay. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the consent agenda. Items 6 and 7. So for possible action, item 6, we have discussion possible action regarding the approval of the V&T statement of accounts, payable checks paid September 1 to 30, 2021. And agenda item 7, for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding approval of the adjusted V&T fiscal 21-22 quarter 1 budget report ending September 30th, 2021. Jim, did you want to say anything about just where we're at? We had a great meeting with Jennifer last week and Allison, and I feel like we've got everything where we need it to be. But do you want to make any comments, Jim, before we?
I might. First off, we had a great meeting with Jennifer in Virginia City last week, and so I think that she kind of understands where we're at now much more than before, and what we're looking for. The budget to actual report and the contractual remaining balance reports that you have in there today, those are ones that I did. They did not come from Jennifer. I know Jennifer is going to work on the budget to actual so that you have something that is in a similar format to the Story County stuff. I'll probably continue to do this for a while to make sure that we are on the same page, but if you look at the bottom half of the budget to actual, you'll see the 71,278.55 matches the check runs for the month of September. So we were able to figure out that. Jennifer did say that they do that for other departments in Story County, so she's going to look to do that going forward for us. But like I said, for now, I will probably just keep doing it. The other thing that we didn't really have broken out yet is if you look on the top part, the 272,000 $614.39 that's in the cap ticket sales. We did not have the breakout at the time for how much of that was Polar versus how much of it was regular trains, so it was just all dumped into one. I was able to kind of work with Fair Harbor, and I think Leah and I are going to meet afterwards. The vast bulk of that is actually Polar money. About $244,000 of that is Polar, and the remaining $28,500 or so is for the regular trains. So it's a significantly different than the where it is in there. But that was something that I didn't have a chance to get before we sent these down to Jennifer for putting in to the packet today. So I think the other thing, and one of the reasons that I wanted to put it in, and I know in the printed copy they're black, but in the online they're in red. So if you are overspending in a line item, it kind of highlights where you are in the year versus what you've spent. So if you take, for example, the office supplies line with an $1,800 budget that we've spent $1,255 year to date, almost 70%. Well, we should have only spent about 25% because this report through September is only 25% of the way through the year. So it's kind of highlighting where you are over where you would expect to be budgetarily. And then eventually we'll have something similar for the revenue, where we're expected to be versus where we are. So I did want to highlight those. And then the second piece of that is the contractual summary, the kind of tracking where our vendors are, both in their total contract, which is the first set of 4 columns, and then the current year allocation, which is the last 4. And it also has the termination date for them, and as we get more, they'll have more in there. But it basically tells you about where we are as far as contractual year to date. So, for example, the atypical consulting, the current year allocation is $111,406. They've spent almost $38,000, so they've got 65%, 66% remaining. Again, a little further than where we would expect, but then again, during the down times when the trains aren't running, you would see less activity for them. So the other one that I did want to highlight, because we're going to have the discussion about the Gabe Williman contract, is there was a lot of discussion about where we were with that contract. And so what I did is, this is only reflective of the work that started after the contract was put in place. And so there were a couple invoices that kind of probably could have been split one way or another. I just decided to put all the invoices that were for the activity after that into that. But according to the conversations that we had with Ken, we would expect most of the work in that contract to be done in the first half of the fiscal year, and a lot less activity in the second half of the fiscal year. So it shouldn't be surprising that one particular contract is spending a lot up front, as opposed to in the second half of the contract. Basically, what we're told is it's a kind of an 80-20. 80% of the money is spent in the first 6 months, with the 20% in the last 6 months. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or take feedback on the new format. But again, thanks to Jennifer for getting some of this out, and I think that we've got a lot better working relationship now going forward. We're getting there.
No, I agree, Jim, and I thank you for taking the time to put this together and for putting the contract sort of log tracking spreadsheet together as well. I think that gives us a good idea of where we stand today and help us tracking during the course of the fiscal year, so we know if we need to do amendments or not. So does anyone have any questions for Jim? Anybody want to pull anything off the consent agenda?
I just have a comment. I super appreciate this. It's helpful because, we recently at the county level did a same kind of quarterly check-in. And one of the questions that I have is, I noticed that, for me, when I'm looking for anomalies, I scan down through that last column, the percent remaining or percent spent. And I have to switch my brain over, because in the expense section, it's percent spent versus percent remaining. Is it possible to align that all to one or the other? Okay, thank you. It's not a deal killer. It's doable. It makes it that much easier to scan through it and immediately see the things that be looking which side of the 25% we're on. So,
Yeah, for this, I will work on that. For this one, I spent a lot of time on the expense. We didn't even have revenue lines until like the 30th of September. And so I haven't spent a ton of time. Now that we're starting to go through the revenue and get the breakouts, then I'll spend some more time on the revenue. And that's a great assumption. I'll do that.
cool. Thank you. Yeah, that's super helpful. And I'm, as I look through the few that flagged, I mean, first of all, none of them are substantial dollar amounts except for maybe professional services. But again, that's explainable. And it's not a huge offset. And as well, I look at something like office supplies, and again, when we're looking at kind of a restart, I can see needing to acquire substantially, and that they should last us a good stretch through. So, not seeing anything that really jumps out at me as something that's super concerning at this point.
Thank you, Clay. That's a great suggestion. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I do have a comment, and
Go ahead, Denny.
it's one that's the reason why you and I are on this board, and that's the marketing side. I just want to, I know that some of this, we didn't get started till October, so a lot of it hasn't come in yet. But it's one of them things you always got to kind of remember, being on this board for a while and knowing the fluctuality of the time of year is, we need marketing at the start of the season, which is at the tail end of this fiscal year to start next fiscal year. So it's kind of one of those things just to throw it out there. We're not having the best regular season run. I think there's a lot of things or reasons for that, but just to keep in the back of on the board to keep in the back of their mind, as we go into next year, we figure out what we want to do. We need some marketing dollars to get us going. Otherwise, if you start like we did this year, just cold turkey, you're going to be taking a while for that to kick in, so to speak, and you could see similar results. So that's my only comment.
Oh, that's a great observation, Denny. So just a question, this 39 that we show here, did we spend, we had some of that, right, for the month of October, but you probably, Allison, you don't know how much of that we might have spent. Not that it's in this report, but do we pretty much have 30-something thousand bucks left?
We do, and I'll address that in the operations report in terms of where we're going to be spending that and when that'll start.
Okay, no, that's perfect. All right. Any other comments? If not, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, Clay Mitchell, I'll move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Clay. We have a motion. Do I have a second?
This is Denny, and I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion by Clay, a second by Denny. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you again, Jim. Great work on that. Really appreciate your expertise in pulling this together for us. So let's go ahead and move on to agenda item number 9 for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the approval of contract FY22-C002 with Amador Stage Lines to provide shuttle services between Gold Dust West and the Eastgate Depot per night of the Polar Express train ride for a total not to exceed amount of $40,000. So if you recall, last month, we had this contract on the agenda, but we needed to give the legal team with Amador a little more time to review it, and they have agreed with the language that was included in the contract. So what you all have in front of you right now, it's the exact same contract with the exception of just changing the date to today's upon approval date of the 28th. So if anybody has any questions, happy to answer any questions about it. If not, I'm glad to accept a motion on the contract. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
move to approve contract number fiscal year 22-C002 with Amador Stage Lines.
Thank you for that motion, Stephanie. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Clay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Let's move on to agenda item number 10 for possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding amendment of contract number FY21-C003 C003 with Gabe Willimon Railroad Construction to provide additional track maintenance of $54,125 for a total not to exceed amount of $94,125. So this one kind of gets us through the end of the calendar year. As Jim was saying earlier, we did meet with Ken, I think a couple weeks ago, a week and a half ago, just to plot out getting us through the end of the the calendar year, and the work that still needs to be done with the emergent and track inspections, the customary normal stuff, and then obviously with PEX coming back in place. So if anybody has any questions or yeah, go ahead, Stephanie.
Sorry about that. I actually would propose consideration of another amendment if the commission agrees.
Okay.
Our next item, we're going to be talking about the RFP for those track maintenance services, and our time frame for solicitation and review, and also to get that contract in place is pretty tight. So I would recommend that we also extend the term of this contract to the end of February, just so that gives us a little bit more time for the RFP. And if I'm not mistaken, I think January and February are probably, that's not a heavy maintenance time. However, I would want to make sure we have Gabe services in case there's an emergent situation. We certainly don't want to be left without somebody that could assist us during that time.
I think that's fair, just given what I understood happened with some of the washout, and we've had the issue with the crossing. I don't want to, that's a good idea, because then we're not having to do an amendment to nickel and dime this thing at every meeting, basically. So you would suggest then that we put this through the end of February? Okay. How does the commission feel about that suggestion from Stephanie? We okay with that? We would just keep the same dollar amount, but extend the term date a couple months. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I guess my question would be for Mr. Rowe, if what we noticed is substantially similar enough that if we change the ending date with an amendment, that doesn't get us into trouble on this amendment to the contract.
I don't think so, Clay. You're just extending the term under the existing or the amended terms of the contract.
Great. So you feel like we have the flexibility, if you will, as we consider this item to make that change?
I do. I was just rereading the agenda, but I think you've got the authority to do that.
Great.
Okay.
And I guess my only other question would be, the amendment is nice and brief, and I like that. It would be helpful for me to just get a feeling, if we could, about what remains to be done, and if there are things in addition to the routine maintenance.
Yeah.
What kind of repair work and those kind of things we anticipate would be covered within that.
Ken, do you want to? I was hoping you might have that sheet. Beautiful. Yes, if you will address that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hi, Clay. Yeah, the arbitrary contract amendment amount, you figure we came up with that somehow. We actually went through the list of priorities we had earlier this year and which ones we're trying to get done to complete this year, and that's where that number came from. There was one item was, and I can send you a copy of this email, but track inspections, signal inspections. There was also some ballast purchase, which sounds like we're going to probably buy that separately. Basically, maintenance, way, labor costs, and pre-emergent purchase and application. Now, that was purchased separately. So right off the bat, out of Gabe's contract, $8,000 doesn't go into Gabe's contract. And thank you, by the way, for that. That was great. That saved us. He got us a $1,000 discount, by the way, by being able to pay cash for it and no taxes on that. That was great. So I do have a list of how we came up with those numbers. And it does fit with the overall original budget for the calendar year of roughly $100,000 for all that work.
Great.
But extending it through February, that was going to be one of my suggestions because there's always some cleanup work after Polar. We still have to do some signal inspections, and then hopefully we won't have any big heavy flooding type winters, so.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, that was going to be my last question, is the recent precipitation, if
Continue.
that factors in at all, if that, squeezes this a little bit, if it was not foreseen.
I was going to talk about the big flood of October 2021 with the gigantic mud flow over the highway in my engineer's report. The bottom line, it took Gabe about an hour to shovel it out by himself with a shovel, so wasn't that big a deal.
Great.
Hour and 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Well, we want a discount then.
Yeah, reduce the bill for that one. Well, and given what happened too this past week, I think having that authority, it's a not to exceed value. So even if we don't need it, no harm, no foul, but just to have it in case we get another big rainstorm isn't a bad thing, in my opinion. So, okay. Any other comments on the amendment for Gabe's contract? Anybody want to take a shot at an amendment? Excuse me, a motion to amend? Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie. Yeah.
I move to approve First Amendment to contract number fiscal year 21-C003 on-call independent track maintenance services contract with an amended annual not-to-exceed amount of $94,125 and an extension of the term to February 28th, 2022.
Thank you for that motion, Stephanie. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Clay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion with the commission? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, Gabe, get that shovel back out and ready to roll. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to agenda item number 11 for possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding a request for proposal of track maintenance services. So I'm going to turn this one over to Stephanie. I just wanted to say thank you to Stephanie, thank you to Clay, and working with Ken. So thank you, Ken, as well, to get this RFP in front of us today. So thank you very, 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 very much. And I'll let Stephanie kind of take the lead on this.
Okay, thank you very much. I wasn't going to spend too much time going through the details, but if there are any questions, please ask them as we go through. I do appreciate that Ken gave a very detailed scope of work for me to work from, so that was very helpful, and I appreciate Clay's input and some discussion we had as well. One of the things that, based on our last item that we just approved, was we were looking at the difficulty with the time frame. So I'm glad we were able to consider that time frame through February for Gabe. But what I would propose then to, again, this is just a draft, but what we have in here is that we would actually issue probably mid-November and then have our due date be January 1st. That gets us through the holidays before we all have to start reviewing this. And so we would line up those other items in between so that they would correlate with those services. And then I think we just back off of that date to get us to the end, and that would allow us to come back to the board or back to the commission and select someone in the January meeting or February meeting, depending on where that lands. So the other thing I just wanted to note, I think I have an error in my total on the score sheets. I think the grand total should be 200, so I will make that correction for those that will be evaluating. As you put these together, at least I kept thinking about it afterwards. And so I just want to throw something out there I didn't put in here that I'd like to ask the commission for consideration. We do talk about in one of our categories for criteria the ability to respond to unplanned situations, and that's something that we just discussed. What we didn't, there are points for that, and it's 15 points. They have to tell us how their availability and the timeframes necessary to respond to the unplanned situations that could occur. And I just didn't know if it would be worthwhile for us to maybe consider, a time frame that we want them to respond within. And I guess where I'm going with that is, I know that if we receive any funding from the federal government, we can't say that we want local only or Nevada only. And I'm not saying necessarily that we do, but I do think that there's an opportunity here to make sure that we're getting the response time that we need, and that will more likely come from a local business. I mean, I am all for keeping our local dollars local, but we can't really give a local preference. What we could do is indicate a time frame that we need our maintenance person to respond within. So just curious if that's something that the commission is interested in adding to the RFP.
I think that's a great suggestion. Are you thinking like same day or within an hour or within 2 hours?
I would think it would be shorter time frame than same day, depending on the situation, but Ken might have
Yeah.
a suggestion.
Like what would be a fair? Yeah.
It would probably depend on the response time, depends on the need, is what it amounts to. If we're in the middle of running trains and we have a rock fall or washout or something, then we need to get on that within a 24-hour period. If there's an issue where we're not running trains and we still have the same type of a situation, then, within a couple weeks. If we have a problem like we tend to do with the crossing gates at Lineham Road, which I'll talk a little bit about this when I get to my engineer's report, then that's something that needs to be got on immediately. So it really depends on the type of unplanned situation. So we've had, which Gary's here too, will testify, and gave to the burning truck on the track incident. That was an interesting one. And that's something we had to get it right on because we're running trains, and instead of that, we have a dump truck that's on the track and burning. So that was something we needed to get out of there immediately. So it really depends on the type of situation. My feeling is to leave it just generic, see how they're planning to do that. Because Gabe's going to basically say, unless I'm out of town, I'd be able to respond within a couple hours and then within a day maximum. Someone from Sacramento is probably not going to be able to do that. So my thought is to just see what the proposer on the RFPs has to say as far as what they can do. So again, trying to identify, what I'm trying to do is not try to identify which type of an emergency do you need to respond to and what time of the year it is. Based on trains, it gets to be a little complicated on the matrix.
So Ken, if I understood what you're recommending is allow each respondent to sort of put their own time frame down, and then we could, for those evaluating, use 10.4 to score accordingly based on those 15 points. Okay.
That would be my recommendation, yes, sir.
Okay. Seems fair. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to suggest if we feel like that's a kind of a crucial element, we could consider, without getting to the complication of dealing with specifics, we could consider overweighting this category slightly. The question then becomes, where do we take it away from to still get us to 100 points? But if it's an important thing, maybe we give it more than 15 points so that the response time becomes a bigger part of the decision.
That's a good suggestion as well. Does anybody have a recommendation? Stephanie, do you have where you would suggest taking points from, or?
I didn't have a suggestion of where to take it from, but I do like that idea. I like the idea of adding a little more weight to it because, our experience is weighted at 25 and cost is weighted at 30, but then the other three categories are weighted, at 15. And I kind of feel like that's pretty important, especially with the weather situations that we deal with regularly. And if you do have a train full of people and something happens, you don't want somebody to be 3 hours away, right?
Right.
I mean, that's not the best case scenario. So being able to give them additional points for their ability to respond within a more timely fashion, I think is appropriate. And maybe part of that could come off cost proposal.
Sure. You go ahead, Jim. Yeah.
So I have a hard time. They have to be here twice a week anyway because they're doing track inspections. So they're going to have some sort of a local presence to be here just to be able to keep up with the track inspections that they're doing. I don't know that I would, I think I'd be more interested in expanding that one bullet point in 10.4 that maybe says, that talks about, be detailed about different scenarios of response time and let them respond to that and see how we, and see what kind of responses that we get. I think I'd be more inclined to do it that way than necessarily give it more weight, because these people are going to have to be here anyway. I don't understand how they would be doing this from far away if they're up here twice a week anyway, and then if that's the case, then their cost proposal is going to be out of line, because they're going to be charging you basically for driving time. So so you're picking it up in your cost side.
I could speak to that. I know other contractors, they send guys over from Sacramento, just a track inspector. And they'll go over to Wabasca and do a track inspection and shoot back home. I mean, that's their only job. They're just track inspectors. And, a company will have just a track inspector. So that'll be his job, just driving all around inspecting tracks. So their presence might be local, but it might just be some guy with the company truck coming out of Sacramento twice a week. It depends on how much money they're making.
And again, I think that's where it shows up in the cost proposal, because if they're sending up somebody here from Sacramento, that's going to show up in their cost. They're going to be unaligned in cost, because it's going to cost more to drive over here from Sacramento twice a week than it is perhaps someone to do it local.
Well, I mean,
Go ahead.
I would say yes and no. If they were grouping regularly scheduled trips with another client in the area, it may be an incremental increase in cost that's kind of not, non negligible. And I hate to deal in theoreticals, right, or what ifs, hypotheticals. It's I'm comfortable with it the way it is. I think if we would be taking points from cost, then it's kind of a wash, because it should show up in one of those two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Either in higher cost or in a slower response time. Either way, the total points between those two get us to a responsive contractor.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm fine with it the way it is. I don't think we need to. I just thought that was probably a better mechanism to do it, given the complexity. Not a fan of getting too complex on the RFP.
And just kind of let folks respond accordingly with how they would deal with certain situations. We could maybe add some language in there that would present them with those. Crossing goes down, mudslide, whatever, washout or something, and
Well, yeah, well, too, and I'm thinking about the pros and cons of being more specific on that, because there is a pro to not being specific, and that is it allows us to evaluate their expertise
Sure.
to some extent. If they leave out key points
Yeah.
without us listing everything that they may have to deal with, that could be a cause for concern, right? It allows us one more way to evaluate their preparedness to take on this task, and so
Yeah.
I'm
Good point. You would expect that that qualified folks would respond with scenarios themselves and how they would address them and their time limits.
Yeah, it's a pretty specialized field.
Okay. Sounds good.
Well, and
Jim?
if you look at 10.4, it says, how do you respond to unplanned situations, including derailment, storm repair, track repair, and right-of-ways due to vandalism? I mean, I don't know if we even need to be any more specific than that. Just put it be detailed after that sentence, or be specific after that paragraph.
Yeah, show your work.
Yep. Exactly. Okay. That sounds good. Stephanie, did you have any other comments you wanted to make?
No, I appreciate the discussion, and I think that's a great recommendation in 10.4. We can just note at the end of that paragraph, be specific, and look at what responses we get.
Okay.
So I did have a couple other comments.
Yeah, please.
On 8.2 and 8.3, I don't know how they are relevant to this particular contract. working with the board and commission and experience managing an attraction. I don't know that those are necessarily relevant to this contract, and I wouldn't want to be trying to grade somebody on train expertise because they managed a circus.
Right.
And so I just don't know that they
Okay.
have, I just don't know that those are really relevant. And then the other one was
Drop
in,
those.
in 9-1A. It's on the V and T track specific. You might want to say, or other applicable short line class 1 or class 2 tracks. I don't want to pretend we are trying to give this contract to a single person because that kind of runs
Sure.
you afoul of
Okay,
the bidding process as a whole.
okay, yep, that's a great.
Could you repeat that addition for me?
In 9-1A, after explain your experience working on the V&T Railroad Commission's track and/or the V&T Railroad track and right-of-way as applicable, add or other applicable short line, class 1 or class 2 tracks. And I think that gets us to somebody who is not necessarily just the V&T, but
Sure.
still the same classes of tracks. And I've got it written down if you want it, Stephanie.
Okay.
Perfect.
Tours.
I thought that was part
Historic
of
tourist
class 1 or 2, but if it's not, then. Okay, then yes, we would want to have the tourist piece in there as well.
Only, oh, sorry, Clay, did you, I just wanted to ask, should it be the PO box for the VNT Railroad? Take me off of that since I won't be on the evaluation committee, or do you still, is it okay if they come to me and then or should we just change the address to be our PO box?
I'd recommend the PO box.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking. And then we could change the in-person to be the 4650 Eastgate Depot. They could physically, if they wanted to bring them there instead of mailing them. Just to take me out of the equation, if that's okay.
You might want to be careful with that because there needs to be somebody there for them to be dropped off to then.
True. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. So we could, if it was in person, they could still deliver it then?
There should be sealed, so these should be sealed.
Okay,
As long as this deal is still intact when the
Yeah.
RFP, when
They come in.
the group gets together to open
Okay.
it, I think I'm fine with them being delivered to your,
okay.
directly to your office. I just would be leery of putting them to a depot that's not
We don't have
consistently
somebody there
manned.
all day, yeah, okay. No, then that's fine. And I won't touch them or anything like that, so I'll just, yeah. So we'll keep it, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I just didn't want, I think there was funny business or something that they were coming my way, but I'm not going to have anything to do with the process. Okay. Any other comments?
So I'm curious on section 5 under duration of service, if we're looking for the start date on it to be as of March 1st, then does the end date also push to that in 2025?
Good question.
And I think that's a good item for discussion. We spoke a little bit, Clay, about what our operating season is. So we felt that this should follow what the operating season is, not necessarily the fiscal year, realizing we might not start exactly at that point this year. But so that, I guess we're asking Ken for your input on where the operating season should end. Should it end at the end of the year or January 1st, or should it realistically, like you were just saying, there's some things to do after the end of the year as the season winds down?
I think we can work with whatever's convenient with the board. I mean, I guess the only time there's going to be an issue in theory is in 5 years. If it expires on December 31st of 2025, then how do we cover that? But I suspect that by that time, we'll be in the process of doing an amendment. Alternatively, you could make it starting in March 1, at least for the initial starting date, but in which case then make them all start March 1.
And then go through March 1, I guess is what we're
Yeah,
asking.
February,
March-
whatever the
March-
last
yeah.
day is of the month, that would work, so.
Go ahead, Jim.
So one of the things that I would suggest, we have atypical coming due on the 25 date. I would move this out to 2026.
6. Yeah.
And then I think that, now that we're going to have a fairly decent RFP template, I think that you just dust it off, change the dates, and
Away you
I
go.
think that we can do it. I don't think it'll take as much the next time around to do it, but I definitely would extend it to 2026 to get us that cycle of not doing all of our RFPs at once.
So we'll go March 1, 2022 through March 31st, 2026. So that gives us basically a
February.
or end of February, sorry. Gives us a 4-year contract duration. Okay.
We had some discussion earlier as we were kind of setting in place ideas on when to renew these things. And I'm just wondering from a kind of operations perspective, Allison, if there, I thought that we kind of had, the direction we were headed was grouping some of the renewals right around the calendar year and some of them around the fiscal year. And this kind of departs from that. I'm just wondering if that causes any sort of wrinkle in it. I think it works from an operational perspective much better to put it where we're talking about. But just from an administrative perspective, does that throw a wrench into things?
Well, for calendar year, historically, based on the commission meetings, November and December are very difficult due to the Polar Express. If you look at our meeting for November, it's not at our normal, fourth Thursday, and we don't even meet in December. So doing a contract or an RFP around the calendar is difficult administratively. I would prefer the February, March date.
Everybody's okay with that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I don't know that it matters when you go out to bid. I mean, you could put this thing out to bid a year in advance. I mean, you could put it out. I don't think that's a matter. I'm fine with it either way. I wouldn't do February because dates change in February. I would do either January 31st or March 31st. I don't like February dates.
I was born in February, Jim. My feelings are hurt.
But not on the 29th, right?
No, I was not. No, I would be a youngster still. Okay, so is everybody okay then if we just made it a March 31st? I know that's an extra month, but on the off chance that I think it's out of line, it gets out of whack, I guess.
So I guess the only question there is budget cycle, and is that too late in the year to? I mean, is that going to mess us up if we're on preliminary budgets?
Well, if we are operating off that plus or minus 100,000, we'd have the budget built for the whole fiscal year, regardless of who the actual maintenance on way vendor is, even for that fiscal 26 year. We would just split it between, who's ever doing the work through March 31st, and then those last 3 months, we'd still have the budget, because that would be independent of who's doing the work, hypothetically. But
Okay. Yeah. So, and I'm just thinking, if on a renewal let's say it came in significantly higher than we had anticipated,
gotcha.
then in our next budget year, we'd have to go a bit higher to make up for being low in the first quarter, or the first quarter of the contract, if you will.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just making sure that awarding a contract by the end of March allows us to make those changes. I think it does.
Yeah, because our tentative would be in April,
April.
and then we would come back and make a final budget in May at the May meeting. So I think we could do it. But
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
wanna speak for
I think
everybody.
you'd be okay. I wouldn't want to go any later than that because you would start to run into the problem of the contract. But I think if you're doing your proposal and your evaluation and awarding in that January, February timeframe with a start date of April 1, I think you'd be okay.
I also wanted to mention, I think I'm supportive as well of Jim's suggestion of potentially eliminating points 8.2 and 8.3. I just wanted to refresh on what kind of the workflow is, or who the direct accountability is for this contractor, because if that is to the executive director, the engineer, some combination of the two, then 8.2, working with boards and commissions, is really not as crucial because they're not a direct report to us. So, and if that's not the case, then maybe we look at some modification and keeping it in there. But
Yeah.
if that's, then I'm supportive of removing A2 and A3.
No, I mean, I think we could let those go as well because we have our maintenance on way supervisor, engineer, whether or not, that's Ken down the road or someone else. I think it's better to have that person who has that expertise overseeing the work that's done because I certainly don't feel comfortable. I mean, I can work a shovel, Gabe, just so you know, and a rake, but yeah, I think it's okay to let those go and let them work with the maintenance on way supervisor, whoever that person is, down the road. For now, that's Ken, obviously. But any other comments or edits, additions? Go ahead.
I just wanted to run down the ones that we've discussed to make sure that I didn't miss anything. So we have in section 5 for the duration of service, we were going to change that to March 1st of 2022 through March 31st of 2026. Under section 8, we were going to move 8.2 and 8.3. Under section 9, we would add after and right-of-way as applicable, we would add or other applicable short line class 1 or class 2 tourist tracks. And I think that was it.
Sorry, were we adding under 10.4, just one small, provide detail, or I forget how you had said it, but
Under 10.4, we were going to add a sentence that said, be specific.
So I don't know if this is nitpicking, but going March 1st to March 31st adds a month into the contract. Doesn't make it even years. And so does it make sense to start at April 1st? So award it by March 31st. Contract starts April 1st of this year, and then I mean, I truly don't know. I'm fine with either, but
I think the only conflict with that is we just extended Gabe's contract to the 28th of February, so that would
yes,
give
we
us
did.
that gap. So, not that we couldn't change it again, but
All right. And then Stephanie, you had mentioned, and this kind of, I guess, may go without saying, but adjusting under the kind of the end of 7 with the timeline, with just adjusting all of those dates. And I don't know if we need to pick them specifically, but just kind of space them out based on our new award date and backtrack them with the same spacing.
correct.
yeah, Mike, can Stephanie have discretion there to work with Allison to kind of reset the dates as far as the RFP schedule without us having to identify those right now? Can she do that?
I think that's acceptable. You made it pretty clear in the record what you want.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Any other? Denny, do you have anything you want to? Okay. No. Okay. All right. Well, that sounds great. Okay, so that's a lot of small edits, changes. Anybody want to take a crack at
Well, I think we can probably do it
motion?
by reference, right? We
Yeah.
don't necessarily, we can just refer to the list that
Yeah.
Stephanie just went down, and
That sounds good, yeah. Anybody want to take a shot at a motion?
This is Jim Wells. I would move to approve the release of the request for proposal for track maintenance services with the adjustments made by Ms. Hicks.
Thank you, Jim, for that motion. Do I have a second?
This is Denny. I'll second.
Oh, geez, whoa, aggressive. Thank you, Denny, for the second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
I
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Again, thanks for the great work, Ken and Stephanie and Clay, on putting this RFP together. I really appreciate it, so thank you so much. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 12 for discussion only. These are our monthly non-action items. 12A, operations report. Allison Bolton, take it away.
Good afternoon. So poor Leah doing our minutes. I've been tasked to speak slower, so I'm going to do my very best. No promises. As always, kind of our roadmap, our train tracks, operations, assets, board relations, and marketing, with Polar Express intermixed within operations and marketing. So operations, September and into October, we had trains running, and then we also were really gearing up for the Polar Express. And so I'd hate to call it a shoulder month, but in essence, it kind of is a feet a little bit off the throttle, just because we know how much November and December is going to be crazy. So, we took kind of a step back, looked at things, analyzed things. We were in a lot of data, a lot of numbers this last month. But in terms of what we've been doing, we've been planning for a Halloween at the depot. We noticed that our numbers were low for this weekend, being Nevada Day as well as Halloween. So we kind of did a last minute, what we're calling the Halloween hunt. And we've put together 10 questions for 2 different scavenger hunts. One would be an adults only scavenger hunt, and the second would be a family friendly hunt, where guests are asked various questions along the depot, along the track, and then as well as their venture in Virginia City, where they can, check the box, take a photo, etc. When they get back to the depot, they'll hand in their scavenger hunt, and then we have 2 prizes that we will select via raffle, one of which was donated from Carson City and the other from Virginia City. After we kind of announced that, we did see a small bump in our ticket sales. Is it enough that we are covering our costs? No. We didn't really put much money behind the Halloween hunt, but it is a lower weekend this next weekend. So noted for as we look, January and February, as we look at our schedule, that last weekend is tough. There's a lot going on this weekend in both Carson City and in Reno. So continued work in Fair Harbor, really kind of diving into those reports and making sure that we're pulling in the right data. We had discovered that there was information imported from the previous ticketing system. So, identifying what is accurate, what may have been lost in the import, and so forth. Customer service, I would say, is really where the bulk of our hours are in this last month. We probably, on average, receive, I'd say, 40 to 60 calls to the 686 number, or through Grasshopper that gets directed to the 686 number. And then from that, we've got 20 or 30 voicemails a day that we're responding to. Majority are for the Polar Express, various questions for some of our new offerings that we have this year, things that both Leah and I are kind of addressing. Hey, is there a way that we can address this via website or our marketing to help with the call? I think part of it is just a change for our database. We have a few new things. So I'm trying to maneuver through that. We did in Fair Harbor, when you book a ticket, and after you are done with your ride, you actually get an email, what we call a canned message, and in there is a post-ride survey. The rail bikes also receive this survey, and so Leah and I went in there, and we actually have 55 responses, which if you've ever been involved with surveys, you know that they're very polarizing. You either get the really, really excited responses or the "this was terrible" response. Looking in there, I wasn't able to upload it to show you the graphics, but overwhelmingly positive. People were very happy. They want to return. This is great. I was actually surprised that we had 55 responses. I'm like, hey, people are actually responding to this. So something that we're going to continue to do in the future, and hopefully do one specifically for Polar Express as well. In terms of just Polar specific things, we have met with, it says event decorator or event producer, kind of depending on, I call her my creative. She's kind of someone that I've always had in my back pocket that I've used for events, and I had her come to the depot and look at various things that we could install permanently, where we wouldn't be reconstructing these things year over year, so investing a cost this year to save costs on years moving forward. An example of this would be when you're in the holding area before you board. In the past, we've had a giant vinyl that hangs up on the wall with kind of a makeshift stairs where the hero boy and the conductor do their skip before you actually board. She's actually looking to develop or build the back of a train in our depot so that it really creates that experience straight out the gate. So that's just an example. Working with we have a new car this year, the deluxe car. So working on the gift for that, working with various hotels for packages. Music licensing, what we discovered is with our licensing with Rail Events, it actually doesn't cover the licensing for the Polar Express music, just to use the Polar Express name and graphics. And so there are two different music licensing companies that we've been working with. One owns the majority of the Polar Express songs. The other owns the majority of the Christmas carols and songs that you would generally sing from here or there. I guess we were able to avoid it for several years, but we got big enough that they found us. So, and it was the recommendation from Rail Events to, as soon as they come knocking on your door, just pay it. So we've been working on that. The North Pole construction with Tom Gray has begun, so they are working on that. And we are happy to announce that we've identified a photographer to do photos with Santa in the depot. She'll be covering all the costs and then just cutting a check to us for 30% of the revenue, the gross revenue. 15% of that goes to, I don't know if I can say that. A percentage of that goes to Rail Events, and a percentage of that comes to us. So that was really big this last month as well. Moving forward in terms of operations, we're finalizing our media night / dress rehearsal logistics. With us being one car short, the large car, 70 people, we are looking at kind of an overflow. So what we're doing is we're actually going to do a dress rehearsal media run for both the 5 o'clock and the 6:30, doing both. So one will have kind of like our partners, those that are really vested, and then one will be media specific. And we're working with both traditional media as well as influencers to ride that first or the second run on November 18th. Finalizing our shuttle schedule, we're working with Gold Dust West and really looking at a schedule that makes sense, because really you look at the timing of when the departure is, but the skit and the excitement, people arrive to the depot an hour before. So trying to do your shuttle schedule around that has been quite the brain twister. But I think we have a shuttle. It looks like we'll be running at least every 20 minutes. A shuttle will be departing from Gold Dust West to the depot. Part of really what this next week is looking like is we have Freedom Rail moving out. They're moving into what we call the Blue Building. That's just down the road there. They're moving all their bikes in there. They're cleaning out the steel building, et cetera. We have a walkthrough with them next Wednesday to ensure that everything is fully cleaned and that we are ready to really roll out the Polar Express. So on November 1st, which is Monday, you'll have our team there really starting to move like tables and chairs and things like that out, and then Freedom Rail moving out as well. I think that could be it. Operations was the majority of our hours this last month. Yeah. So our numbers for general season trains, October was a great month. We had 921 passengers. This is inclusive of this weekend's runs. Like I said, this weekend isn't high numbers, but last weekend was amazing. The weekend before that, we actually had a sold out train. So that was the first, and it's a popular month until you reach the last weekend of the month. Note for all of us as we look into our schedules moving forward. Polar Express. So at the time of posting, which was last Saturday, we were at 70% sold at a 433,000 gross. We pulled the numbers this morning, and we actually are at 8,042, which is 80% sold, and our revenue of 491,705. I did take a peek. If we were to hit max sellout on everything, including, say, parking, we're looking at about 518. So there is some room there for us to grow, particularly in parking, which is where we're going to boost a lot of our marketing once we wind down trains here. Freedom Rail, these numbers are reported by Freedom Rail that we present to you. So August, we know, was low due to the fires. September, I don't know why we were so low, but what we went ahead and did was the story gets better. October, we were up to 682. So we did see a bump in October for our rail bikes. It does look like they're, I think, down to about 2 runs a day, give or take. But it is definitely slowing down as the weather, I believe, gets colder. In terms of assets, really the biggest thing is moving everyone out and us going into Polar. Various things that we've been doing from the operation side, scheduled our septic so that it's more consistent as we head into the Polar Express season. Doing some routine depot keep up. We did have a situation where we coordinated with BLM to remove someone that was taking power from our building. They were plugging into their trailer. So it was actually pretty straightforward. They sent out a ranger. They left the next day. So that was great. And then propane as well, as we head into Polar, coordinating the schedules there. What we're looking at moving into the next 2 months really is there was a gentleman that Tom used to work with, as well as Elaine, that did groundskeeping for us. So he'd come in, open up the restrooms, blow everything down, handle snow removal. I'm in the search to get his contact information because it's been expressed to me that he might be interested. If not this gentleman, someone else that we're identifying that can come and kind of do that manual labor types of things, minor depot improvements, and then as we are pulling out all things Polar, really getting a better inventory of what we have. Board relations, for the most part, pretty straightforward. Accounts payables, prepping for the meeting, so forth. Lots of assistance with the audit with Casey Nealon, our new auditing firm. And through that, learning the things that the operations team needs to do for the next audit. Types of the reports that they're asking for, types of information that they're asking for. And so what Leah and I have done is, as we get those questions, we make a note in our system of like, hey, we need to start saving this and saving that so that the next audit is a more seamless process. Coordinating with Draco. We did potentially have a possible grant. It's looking like we may or we will not be a candidate for it, mainly because it's under the Department of Transportation, and really for those high rail, it's for safety and infrastructure, and for us to apply that to a tourist track didn't seem, and we worked with Ken on this, and I'm not sure if it's in his engineer's report, but we're going to let that one go, unfortunately. So Lauren with our team is trying to identify if there are any grants out there that we could be potentially for. And then at this point, she's putting together kind of that agenda for that January retreat of when we can establish the foundation to go outside of what we currently qualify for. Working on the specialty license audit, trying to establish that tax exempt status with various vendors. That's actually been a little bit more difficult than we anticipated, mainly because we don't have a number. So when we hand the sheet that says like, here's our tax exempt, there's actually not a tax ID number on there because we don't pay taxes. So we've been denied a few times, and we just kind of are trying to go up the ladder to establish accounts with various popular stores that we would use to establish that. And then we did have coordinated with Jim Wells to do a presentation with the Kiwanis, kind of identifying some things that we could have the commissioners assist us with to help alleviate our time. Up next, really working for that board retreat. We did have a conversation with the Nevada Mining Association, which was very fruitful. They are very interested in becoming involved, helping us fundraise. Would love to know more about our foundation when we get it established. And so hoping to meet with them in person in the next month or two, possibly January, based on Polar Express. But I think that could be a very mutually beneficial relationship there. And the audit, really. Marketing. Admittedly, marketing since we started in June has been a little bit slower. I'm going to touch on public relations, and then the ad buy is where we'll talk a little bit more. But we did one press release this last Sorry, we did one e-blast this last month. Another high click rate, not our highest ever, which as I reported in our last meeting, but we did have a high click rate for this one, and this was focused on the Halloween hunt. And then we did have a hit in Carson now for through Carla Wilson. She's soliciting youth groups to staff our elves for the North Pole. So they did cover that one as well. Social media, we did have an increase, not a significant bump, but we are going up, not down, which is what you want to see. So 16,650 page likes with the 5,816 page reach. Instagram, 2,500 followers, 1,200 accounts reached, 130 accounts engaged, which basically means of those that we reached, they actually hit like, or they put a comment, or they shared it, and so forth. The stories, again, are very popular. We're averaging probably 1 to 2 a week on our social media. I would say I would like to be in the 3 to 4 posts a week on our social media. So that is an area of improvement on our end. So advertising, we have 2 buys that we are working on with our advertising. So knowing that there was budget, however, not knowing how the season would go or how Polar Express would sell, we held on doing an ad buy really because we just didn't know if it would be fruitful, right? I have 2 buys. The first is for the Polar Express, and that one is really set to launch probably next week, tomorrow, real soon. That one we're doing radio, always on digital, and Spotify and Pandora. I can't click out of here to look at this, and I don't have it printed. So I'm going off the top of my head on this one. Originally, we had $75,000 in our advertising budget for the Polar Express. With us being 80% sold out, we actually went back to our ad buyer twice to kind of decrease of what we were spending. And so now we're down to 90, did I put it in here? I don't think I put it in here, 9,500 for the ad buy. So that, again, on radio as well as digital, and then some social posts and so forth. Part of that is kind of an overall general branding for the Polar Express, establishing ourselves as, the premier holiday train to go to in the region. The second buy is a general branding buy. We have $40,000 in the budget for that one. The budget came back from the buyer a little bit higher, so we're still kind of massaging that one before we really hit the ground running. But that one I'm looking to turn on right away in terms of search and retargeting for general branding. Then we really hit the ground running starting in February with us launching in May for Mother's Day. What we're looking at is next spring is a political season, and advertising is thin in terms of availability, and it's expensive. So we're looking to secure that now. We are going to incorporate what's called outdoor posters. So they're not necessarily the huge billboards that you see. They're a little bit smaller, and you see them in Reno. We also shifted kind of our demographic for this because we were going a little bit younger, family, so forth, but our demo for this for the train is affluent and a little bit older. We're looking at, the 65 plus. So we're going for a few different radio stations, looking at a few different TV stations as well, doing those outdoor posters, and starting really heavily in February. I did ask her if we needed with our budget, with the way inventory is going with our budget, I did ask her to pull beyond the end of June to see what's the inventory look like. And so she's working on that now to see if we need to identify that now, if we can, secure that without putting money into it. And she will get back to me on that. So the short of it on our ad buy, we're starting probably Monday, heavy digital, heavy radio, minimal for PEX to get that last 20% sold. You're looking at the early dates that are still available. We're not running after November 30th, so we're just running through November. And then starting for our general branding campaign as soon as possible with a heavier hit starting in February.
Allison, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
I have to excuse myself, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Mitchell. But I just wanted to, I have to step away.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Thank you. website. Interestingly enough, I had reached out to our web team for some of the questions that we had identified in our last meeting in terms of conversion and so forth. I discovered that we had 2 Google Analytics accounts. This is reflective of one. The one that actually showed our conversion is in the one not in front of you right now. So in the next meeting, we'll have different numbers. And so what they were saying is that Google's basically changing how they target things. Things are changing with cookies and so forth. So these are accurate. However, there is a different portal in which I'll pull some different numbers for next month. But we had 9.8K users, and I have an answer for the new user question in terms of the reset. So what's happening is in the UK, basically anywhere other than the US, that cookies pop-up that comes up and you either accept or deny, it's not actually required in the States. So we don't have it on our website, mainly because our traffic is mainly US only. If your settings on your own IP or your own device says to not allow cookies, it's always going to reset because it's basically telling the computer, don't remember me, don't track me. Even if you say, yes, track me on that cookies pop-up, if your settings on your IP says don't, it's not going to. So that's why you see the new users number high, because with security, a lot of people have that on their own personal IP address to not be tracked. So that's the answer to that question. And then I was able to pull user city, not user state. So it goes from country and then to city. Reno, Sac, and Washington, it didn't specify to me what Washington. My guess is Utah, because that would be the closest Washington city to us. That would be my best guess. But there's no really way for me to click into that to see exactly from where. Our sources, Google being the highest, and then our page is currently the Polar Express being our most popular page. Questions? Again, it's always a high-level overview of some of the various things that we do in the month, not all-inclusive, but just to kind of give you a snippet of what we've been up to.
Just one. Do we need an agreement for the photographer?
An agreement with the photographer. It's in David's inbox currently of what the photographer kind of drummed up. It came to me on Monday. Our posting was on Saturday. And we weren't able to identify if it would be considered late material or not. It is a revenue only. There's no expense to us, and I've not been able to circle with Mike Rowe on that either. Essentially what the photographer drummed up was kind of like bullet points of like, hey, we're going to cover these costs. They're paying for Santa. They're paying for the photo sleeves. They're paying for all of the paper. They're going to collect the money. They're doing it all. They're just cutting us a check for the 30%. And that's what's inclusive of what she gave me as a contract. So I don't know if that needs to be presented to the commission or not, or if I am able to sign that. Mike, I'm looking at you. Okay. And Mike was out of town as well. So I think we just need to connect on that to see if that's something that needs to come to the commission.
I would prefer that it did,
Okay.
just for us to see what it is that is being agreed to. Because there should be some, I mean, you're going to have to obviously give them space, provide them electricity. I'd like to see the points, what the commission is obligated to do.
It's definitely not that detailed.
Right.
With November 30th being our next meeting, would we be able to identify a committee? Would that be possible to review that and move forward with it? Or would we need to do a special meeting?
That you might have to ask Mr. Rowe.
I mean, I would think, if we had some review and then ratification after the fact, would be one.
I'm kind of okay with even seeing it after the fact. I just think that the commission should see it.
Okay. I will coordinate with David and Mike on that.
Great. Any other questions about Allison's presentation?
Just one. How is the 866 number working?
The 866, is that the
The new
AT&T?
800 or number that we did, we said, the
Oh, the 833.
833, sorry,
Yes.
833, sorry.
We actually just talked about that at lunch, and we
Yeah.
pulled it up on Grasshopper to see. We do, I would say and Leah might need to jump in because she manages the phone more than I do. I would say it's about 50-50 in terms of people coming direct to the 775 number or going through the 833 Grasshopper tree. Two reasons for that. One being, if Leah and I respond, we directly give the 775-686 because it goes directly to us. Secondly, it is listed on our website next to the 833 of a local number that you can contact. What was interesting, the last week was the report that I pulled. We had no calls to Freedom Rail, 48 minutes to us, and 7 minutes to Railroad. I would say, and I'm sure this will get into it with the engineers report a little bit on the phones and the speediness and the promptness of our responses. I think it's working. We're definitely seeing less traffic on that AT&T bill, and we did pull some numbers out.
Yeah, I guess that also kind of goes along with something we're seeing in the visitor center there up in Virginia City is a lot of confusion. There's a lot of new train-related activity in the region. So we're seeing a lot of phone calls coming in asking, hey, what is this? What is that? Website, tickets, winter tickets for sale, kind of a thing. There's still, I think, perception in the public that's still confusing on who's doing what.
Yes.
So it's almost like one of those things we probably want to talk about in January when we think about looking at other links, what were our call to action when we're advertising just to try and make it a little clearer for the public because it is challenging. Someone comes in and they want something, and then trying to figure out or explain to them where that activity is at.
We field it a lot on the phone of, hey, I've got this pumpkin train ticket. I need a refund. And then having to defer them over to virginiatruckee.com or, going back to the phone tree or giving them a different number. We do get a lot of that. And then we recently found out, I think it's about 2 weeks ago, that virginiatruckee.com said that we weren't running still. And not on purpose. It was just one of those things that got missed. And so we did get a few phone calls that were like, hey, we saw on this website you weren't running yet. I scoured our site. I'm like, can you tell me where that is? And then I finally discovered, oh my gosh, she's not even on our site. She's on Virginia Truckee, which is saying we're not running. And so Tom fixed that immediately when I brought it to his attention. So there is confusion. We do offer two different products, but they are complementative, is that a word? To each other. For example, if we're running the diesel, people come in and they aren't happy about it. We are able to say, hey, the steam's running up in Virginia City. When you get there, you'll be able to check that out. So we try to piggyback on each other, but you're so right. It is confusing.
Yeah, one thing that I know they did it in years past, and Tom's talked about it before, and we bounced the idea around. The timing was never right. But one thing is now that we've got a phone tree set up, a portal, maybe it's time to talk about a landing or a splash page for a website that as a portal to all the other entities online. I don't think it would cost a whole lot, but it was one of them things, and maybe it's a joint effort between some of the, Dave's organization and mine, and getting this up, talk to Tom about putting it together. Maybe one of our marketing meetings is like, how can we help the public a little bit and get to what they want to buy? So
I
it's
agree.
just a thought.
And that existed in the past, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all I got.
All right, great, thank you. If there are no more questions or comments, then we will move on to our attorney's report. Mike Rowe.
Thanks, Clay. Several things popped up this month that out of the ordinary. The auditors have requested the paperwork on Draco. Fortunately, I've got a complete file on that, and I will get that to David, who actually made the request. So I will forward that information on to David, and he can get it to the auditors or wherever it needs to go. We also got a second public records request for information relating to the work that was done on the 18 under the CFR. And Ken and I both looked into this, and under the CFR, either you or your operator are required to keep records of the work that was done on the 18. And we of course don't have those records. We have to request those, get those from Tom Gray. I haven't received them yet, but then I was out of town for the last couple of weeks, so it's a matter of just following through with that. Jim, David, Ken, and I met this past month on David's request for an opinion relating to sole source contracting, and that will be on your November agenda for you guys to make a decision about it. And I'm not prepared to go deep into that today, but just as a heads up, you will have that on your agenda for next month. I think it came through Leah, but I'm not sure. The Polar Express owner and the studio want to be named as additional insureds on your insurance policy, and I've requested that information from the Nevada Insurance Pool. I've sent Wayne Carlson a request for an updated certificate of insurance that names the Polar Express owner and the studio as additional insureds under your policy. It's not a big deal. It's something that happens just about every time that you're dealing with an independent contractor. As soon as I get that, I'll forward it on to, again, David, who was dealing with the Polar Express representative. Other than that, been pretty quiet. I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Rowe.
Do we have, I don't remember seeing a note for the Draco that is going to be the new payment schedule that they're supposed to.
I can't hear you.
I don't remember seeing a note with the payment schedule for the new Draco note that went into effect.
That was the request. The auditors apparently wanted backup information after we had deposited the 200,000. And I have a file on it. My recall on that, Jim, is that when it was done by the previous commission, it was not memorialized into a formal adjusted note. But again, that's just my recall, and I need to look at the file to see if we have anything that will help.
Yeah, because I know that the auditors were probably looking for the original note that gave you the balance that was due in December, the 400 and I'm not going to get this right, 428,000 or whatever it was that was due. That basically we are redoing a new note with 200,000 down, and then they're going to make another set of payments until some date. I don't think I've seen either of those payment schedules.
I don't recall seeing that.
Okay. I think we need to find it. There should be some kind of an agreement that says that Draco was supposed to pay us 428,000, but they're only going to pay us 200,000 and then pay us some monthly amount for going forward, because that money is now due monthly. And then the other thing that I don't think has ever been addressed in that is the interest that was accruing since January.
Right.
I don't think we've had anything that says where we are with collecting that interest on that balance that never got paid. And
Jim, the only thing I can recall about that, and again, I want to dig into the file, what I recall is that was all discussed at a board meeting, and the commission voted to approve it and the payment. And if I remember right, and maybe Ken would remember, Elaine was the one that was handling all of that information and came up with the payment amount and the interest payment. And she was the one that had dealt with Roy Street.
yeah, and unfortunately, I tried going back through some of the old meetings and couldn't, I don't think I could find anything in the old meetings that was presented to the board that's on the website as far as what was agreed. But I thought that there was a discussion about, we had to send him a letter that says, you know, you have to pay interest. I mean, we have $428,000 that basically they didn't do anything with for 9 months. I mean, it is now the end of October. They didn't pay us the balloon payment that was due, and they didn't pay interest on that balloon payment.
That's correct.
You
I'm
know,
not
at some
aware that
point-
they did.
At some point, we need to do something about that. That's not appropriate for us to just say, okay, here's $450,000 that you can borrow for 9 months for free. I want that. I'll take $450,000 for 9 months for free. That's not appropriate. And, you know, we should have foreclosed, we should have done something. And at some point, we do need to do something. We need to go back
I agree.
and get that interest and get those interest payments. And I'd like to see a repayment schedule that is reflective of this new note, because I saw, the one thing I did see in either in the minutes or in an agenda was that there were a couple of different potential solutions after there was, you know, like a 5-year and a 4-year and there was nothing specific about what interest rate they were going to be. And I'd like to see what the final agreement is that the commission has gotten themselves into that got us $200,000 and some payment schedule going forward. And I can't find it, and I know the auditors will need it, and the commission should have it. I don't know where it is, and if Elaine had it, then maybe we need to go to Elaine. But at some point, we need to have that information, and we do need to circle back on the interest. And I don't know whether that's write a demand letter. I don't know where to even start. I mean, but we got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Jim, I was going to say, you know, I brought this up when things first were delayed past, you know, I brought it up with the chairman, and at the time, I think the conversation was, let's get through getting the money actually released, and then we'll look at the interim period where there really wasn't anything specific laid out about how that should be handled. And go back and look at that and figure out how to cure it, for lack of a better term. And so you're right, it should not have gone on this long. That being said, my understanding is that was kind of the order of operations of how we were going to attack getting things right. There was an old payment schedule in the January meeting packet, not a note per se, but a schedule of payments. And I don't know if we have anything since then, at least not that's been presented to the board.
Yeah, that's the one I think that was when they had the discussion about whether it would be a 4-year or a 5-year, and yeah, and at some point, you know, when you do an agreement with a balloon payment, you get the balloon payment. You know, we got nothing.
Right. Well, there was some complication with the escrow company and some of that stuff, and so and I think that's what was needed to be worked through. But that is a separate issue from what do we do in the meantime.
Yeah, and that was predicated. My understanding is that's predicated on the usage of the property. The usage of the property precluded the company that was doing the work from participating in the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
That's not our problem.
Right.
That's
Agreed.
their problem.
Agreed. Yep. All right. Any other questions or comments on the attorney's report? I just have one, and that is it permissible to know who the public records requests are from? Is that public record?
Yeah, I'll be happy to tell you. It's the same guy that requested it the last time, Kim Fagert.
Okay. Great. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for that report. Ken, we'll go ahead with our engineer's report next.
Thank you, Clay. Yeah, sort of scattered here, just made a bunch of notes and added to it. First thing I'd like to do is introduce Gary Luce, who is in the background here, and you probably saw him on television here a month or so ago, and he was looking at the settlement data on the Overman embankment. Gary's been our geotechnical engineer on a volunteer and coerced basis, as well as a paid basis, for about 30 years. Gary's out and lives in Arizona for the most part. He's out on a couple other projects, and He also participated in the tunnel annual inspection. We didn't do an annual inspection this year, but Gary says it looks pretty good. Gary's really the guy that's responsible for coming up with the rehabilitation concept and design of that, what do I want to say, the most expensive asset that the railroad has. Anyway, so I wanted to introduce Gary, and he's headed back to Arizona, I believe, soon as he gets out of the meeting. Talking about a grant situation, yes, the DOT FRA grants, I went through the Federal Register on that. Those, I don't see one that's really applicable. They're more, again, related towards safety enhancements. Gary, on the other hand, went onto the Northern Nevada Railroad site and found out that they'd received a significant number of grants that are based on a cultural enhancement basis. I haven't looked into them yet, but Allison and Leah and David now have a copy of an email I got from Gary on those grants there too. And they were able to use those grants to do track improvements. And so I'm not sure if it's applicable there or not. But again, another opportunity, and I appreciate Gary seeing that, noticing that on the Northern Nevada site. Talked a little bit about the phone situation. Again, we're required to have an emergency contact number. We're sort of pushing the gray area because if you have an operating speed of less than 15 miles an hour, you are definitely allowed to use a recording device, if you will. Our two crossings that are the biggest concerns, Lineham Road, and there's one that's down the street from there. We're actually in a they're in a little bit higher operating speed. We're actually 30 mile an hour maximum speed on those. So what we have right now is sort of working, and it'll work just fine unless there's an issue. And then if there's an issue, the FRA is going to say you need to go to a continuously monitored 800 number site. So that's something we need to consider going back to that system. I did get a couple of phone calls asking me about from the public asking me about train schedules and where we buy tickets. Because I think what's happening, and they get onto the phone tree number, and the easiest thing is to hit 0, which is, okay, now you got the engineer to report a problem. So,
Everyone's situation is an emergency, is what we're finding.
yes. Well, exactly. I would too. I'm not going to go through this phone tree. Heck with it. So that's something we won't have a problem unless we have a problem. So we need to think about what we're doing with that number and said what we're going to do in the future. Talking about Gary and the grant situation, Gary, we've completed all of our bridge inspection. Kent did the bridge inspection. Gary did the tunnel inspection. Kent is going to go back in the next week or so and finish up the remainder of the structure inspections, culverts, crossings, signage, slopes, and we go through this process to try to identify what needs to be worked on. I bugged Kent a little bit about, we want to definitely do the culverts because you try to look at those in the fall to say which ones really need some work right now and which ones are fine. So hopefully that'll happen before we get another rainstorm. Shifting into the rainstorm. Based on the storm we had, I called up Gabe last Monday morning and we said, let's take a little storm assessment trip. As it turned out, there was really no damage at all. The only thing was the Lineham Road mud flow, which again took Gabe about an hour or two to clean up. He's going to have to go clean the flangeways up a little bit more. We previously in the month had another incident with what happens there is coming out of the old Art Wilson mine are trying to think the name. It's Archismo, something like that is the new name and I talked to the manager, new name of the mine. They drop out some gypsum when they're going across the crossing, which has got a high metal content. When we had that little bit of a rainfall earlier this year, we ended up shorting the circuit out. And so Gabe was in the process of digging some of that gypsum out. The mine offered to help, came down there with the water truck to help settle, cleaning up some things. And of course, those cribs that he got cleaned out of the contaminated ballast are now full of dirt. But again, it's pretty minor work that has to be done there. So we had the shunt and mud scenario at the Lineham Road crossing. Again, pretty minor. Rest track looked really good, was very pretty up there. Because we got snow in the higher elevations, there just was very little, few rocks down here or there, but nothing that was any significant. So dodged a bullet there. Gabe had started, and I let him talk about this a little bit if need be, into some of our work that we identified for surface and lining track. We had a location at 15-3, Mount Post 15-3, which he started on working and then was going to shift to the Overman. Unfortunately, there were some equipment issues, and right now we don't have a tamper available, so we're going to try to get back on that as quick as possible. Based on the pre-emergent, which would have been nice to have down last Friday, but what didn't happen, Gabe's in the process of putting it down right now. Again, the pre-emergent basically tries to target essentially cheatgrass. It works pretty good. Doesn't get the sagebrush outside of the immediate track bed surface. But I think he's got a couple more days, maybe one more day to get that material out, and that should be completed. After that, we're going to try to get back to surfacing again, depending on what Gabe can get done by hand, probably renting Tom's liner to do a little lining at Overman too, and we're just going to sort of play that by ear, weather-wise, how much we can get done. I was hoping to have it done before this point. The idea is that when Gabe picks up that track and moves it or raises it, all he's doing is positioning it. The train is really what packs it down. And so we try to get a certain amount of train traffic over that, knowing it's still going to settle again, but it's a iterative process. The good thing is that we're going to get back to the Overman as quick as we can, which there hadn't been done up there and in other locations for a couple of years. So we've got more work to do. The good thing is that budget number is probably going to be less than we and just authorized Gabe to proceed with for the rest of the year. Also included that, depending if we get how much we get done. We've ordered some ballast from JT, from V&T Rock, and that would need to be loaded up into a ballast car and a work train schedule with Tom to get it done. We're not going to take it up next to the track because that's right in the middle of the Polar Express. If we're going to do it, we're going to make sure we get it boom, 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 in and out during the week where it doesn't interfere with the Polar Express operations. We ordered a little aggregate. It's invisible, apparently, at Eastgate.
I saw it today.
The joke was, are you guys going to get some gravel to pick up a couple of stumbling hazards, tripping spots before the Polar? And the answer was yes. And the joke was, I don't see any ballast. I said, well, that's because it's gray. It blends in with the others. So Gabe's going to be doing that. Annual inspections. I asked Gabe, and this goes back to the depot maintenance item, that after this weekend, that he turn off the water to the standpipe for the, shut off the water, which has got a stop and drain, to the standpipe for filling the locomotive tenders, because you don't want that material freezing. I think what happened last year, why the drinking fountain is inoperable, is that also has a stop and waste. It was never turned off last year. And so why that is leaking, I suspect it's because it froze last year.
Well, and the drinking fountain, it works. It's just become a bird bath. So it's a little bit of an eyesore, which is why we've covered it.
Okay, I think 1-800 call a plumber next year. Think about that. But we'll turn it off so it doesn't get any worse than it is. But I asked Gabe to go ahead and take care of those. That's really about all I've got at this point. Gabe, I don't know if you want to discuss anything? Yes, I do. I sort of blasted through what you were doing there, so.
Yes, I was putting down the pre-emergent today, and I got a phone call from the rail bike people who got contacted by the Carson Highlands mini storage, right there, railroad east of the bridge. And apparently some of our dirt is washing down in their thing. You know, I just got the news like 15 minutes before I came here. So we drove over it, and yeah, there's a little bit of issue. It shouldn't be too hard to fix, but I just, we need to fix it because we need to be good neighbors, pretty much. And it's our material running down, so.
Okay, we can take a look at it again.
That, and you got to move some blocks and stuff like that, so. Just fun stuff. That's it. Just wanted to let everybody know.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from the commission?
Thank you. I just had one comment I wanted to make. Last month, Ken and I talked a little bit at the commission meeting about the V&T right-of-way that was granted from the BLM. With the help of city staff, we spent some time researching that this last month, and we have been able to confirm that it's a permanent right-of-way grant, but it's not a fee title ownership to the V&T. So I think we've resolved that issue. We have all of BLM's documents that we do have a permanent easement, but we don't own that property in fee title. So
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. Our upcoming meeting, mark your calendars. It is not on Thanksgiving. It is going to be on Tuesday, November 30th at 1 p.m. At this point, we'll move to item number 13 on the agenda, which is commissioner comments or announcements and requests for information. No action will be taken, no discussion among the members or with staff will take place during this agenda item. Are there any announcements or comments from the commission? Or requests for information? Very good. We'll open it up for public comment one more time. The public's invited at this time to comment on any matter that is not specifically included in the agenda as an action item. No action may be taken on a matter raised under this agenda item. Is there any public comment from within the room? I don't see any. Do we have any public comment from our broadcast?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
Thank you very much. Well, with that, it leaves us item number 15, which is to adjourn. Do we need a motion for that, or is it something we can just do? Can we take a motion? I will accept a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Sedini, so moved.
Great, thank you. Meeting adjourned.